Used business and enterprise hardware usually has some of the best deals you can get when it comes to tech. And the best examples of this I have are old business laptops like the ThinkPad T-Series I made a couple videos on, which you can literally get for $200 to get an amazing old business laptop. Or used servers if you want to spend $1 per CPU core, on your power bill. And when I was trying something a little less enterprise, rigid, and built for people not in suits, the Dell XPS 15, I realized I was seriously missing out on a nice 4K display that is meant to display more than just spreadsheets and emails lying about a raise for the third year in a row when every time you speak in person, you are assured you will get it, so why even bother lying? Anyways, when I stumbled on used 4K monitors in the $100 to $200 range for name brand monitors, what can I say? I love a good deal. Honestly, the hardest part of finding a 4K monitor for under $200 is finding the monitor. Man, that was a really stupid sentence. If you just search 4K monitor on eBay or whatever your preferred site to lowball people is, there's a good chance you won't really find the best monitors or deals. I think there are two good ways to approach this. The way I typically do it is doing broader searching on eBay or other sites. Like with laptops, I generally look up a laptop brand, sift through their models, and then I find something that interests me. Then I look up a detailed spec sheet, maybe some reviews, and try and get a sense of how good it is. So for monitors, getting a small list of monitors you're interested in, then specifically searching for whichever of those you like can be a good way to find a decent deal. If you're lazy, you can just search 4K monitor, but just make sure you set it to used only listings and max out the price at $200 and just start looking. And if you're really lazy, just click my affiliate link in the description to bring you to the search on eBay or the exact monitor that I bought for this video on Amazon. Problem is, you're going to have a ton of random brands thrown in your face, and all these numbers, what do they mean? If you go this route, you kind of go the opposite and find monitors to research and decide if you like them or not, which can be problematic because they might sell during your research if it's a good deal. I did the latter since I had nothing to do and I'm trying to avoid social media, so why not exchange one toxic trait for another? I did this for a few days until I stumbled upon a nice BenQ monitor that sold right before I bought it while I was researching it. So I went ahead and panic bought a Lenovo L28U30 after looking at the spec page and thinking it was all right. Add that to the toxic trait list. I had a couple of reasons to be a little scared of something like a $100 4K monitor, especially because I remember the time when finding a 4K monitor under $1,000 was a big deal, especially an IPS one. One worry I had in particular was the black levels and also response time. I used to have a couple monitors provided by my work for, work, and the black levels were horrible, the build quality was just plain bad, and the lack of adjustment gave me neck pain I should be compensated for, I don't know, something. The case got thrown out, but I'm not a quitter. Plus, when I tried to play games on my work laptop, I could barely win a game because of the response times. And don't even get me started on watching movies. Seriously, who's blowing up my Teams? It's 9:30 in the morning. My main concern, though, I had really was shipping. Just from how my packages get straight chucked onto my porch 10 feet from my gate because Daddy Bezos saw his turnover was only 99% for the day. I was pretty worried if my monitor would arrive in decent shape, especially considering a lot of eBay sellers package things like, well, this. To my surprise, my monitor was delivered softly on my porch, and the seller, who was actually pretty new to eBay, actually put foam on all four corners of the monitor with quite a bit of bubble wrap. The stand was loose and outside the bubble wrap, kind of like an unhinged family member you only see on Thanksgiving, so it's not really a problem until it becomes one day. Either way, it did arrive in good shape, but that doesn't mean the monitor itself is any good. Starting off with the specs, this is a 28-inch IPS monitor with a resolution of 3840 by 2160. It was released in 2020 and is technically an 8-bit panel, but has frame rate control, which fakes 10-bit by giving you seizures. I wasn't able to get that to work though, even over DisplayPort, as my PC said it was an 8-bit panel no matter what, but supposedly it's supposed to look alright once you wake up. It has a brightness rating of 250 nits sustained and 300 peak, along with a contrast ratio of 1000 to 1, and a response time of 4 milliseconds in the extreme mode, and 99% coverage of the sRGB color gamut. And I should also add, the response time when you're not in extreme mode is only 6 milliseconds. It also has a pretty nice matte finish, and uses a peak of 48 watts. Not an important stat, just one I found interesting. Also, it's Windows 7 and 10 certified. Suck it, Linux users. First, the monitor itself has a pretty clean, businessy design, as typical from Lenovo, and some nice bezels. It just looks very monitor-ish, as monitors typically do. Has a DisplayPort, HDMI and audio out port, and a stand that can be tilted up and down, but it cannot be rotated, raised, lowered, or basically anything at all. And if you're one of those people that uses a computer and happens to have this monitor in there about the same room, well, it's gonna jiggle a little as you type. That was a really weird word for that, but I don't know of another one to use. The overall build quality is just alright, but it's not a cheap plastic mess. And it has a VESA mount if your neck, back, and wrists are really that important to you, I guess. Anyways, time for the actual screen. I went ahead and turned it on, and Wow. The black levels, well, but I did think it was odd since the reviews I saw were generally good and the specs were good. What am I missing? Colors are dull, contrast is horrible. Frankly, my Switch screen looks better, and that's 720p. I mean, at least there's pixels, but when I changed my display settings on my PC, the screen would still be on, but it was actually black. So I knew I was doing something wrong. Well, after some digging, lo and behold, in my NVIDIA control panel, the monitor was set to limited color depth for some reason. So I changed that, and man, the contrast was much better. The blacks were actually black, and it was so much just brighter. Plus, sharpness was off the charts compared to my other monitors. Viewing angles were alright, not amazing, and it did have some IPS glow, which isn't unheard of, considering this is an IPS monitor. Colors weren't necessarily the most vibrant, and I did notice a very, very slight purple tint over the monitor. I don't have a good way of showing that, but it just kind of does. I got weird eyes. I don't have the tools to calibrate this though, but if I did, I think that could be fixed pretty much immediately. The backlight bleed was pretty well controlled, all things considered, at least with my past monitor experience. Really, mostly you could only see it on camera, but on camera it does look pretty bad. In person, I don't notice it too much. There was also no dead pixels to speak of or any major defects on this monitor, which is nice. Speaking of pixels though, man, that's a lot of pixels. There was also minimal ghosting with overdrive off, but once overdrive was turned on, there was a pretty significant amount of ghosting. And even worse with overdrive set to extreme. Basically, there was a second whole ass UFO sitting behind the first one on extreme. While gaming, I typically kept overdrive on normal, since ghosting was significantly better on normal than extreme, and I had a pretty decent experience overall. For something more competitive, a 4K 60Hz screen isn't exactly ideal, and getting something like a 120Hz monitor might be a better idea, but it was alright, especially for something that isn't competitive. Having a nice 4K monitor can really enhance the experience with all the extra detail it provides, especially in more cinematic games. For movies, I would usually prefer something that has a lower resolution, but properly supports 10-bit HDR content, since this is only 28 inches. It's still a really nice experience watching 4K movies either way. Much better than a cheapo 1080p monitor, or honestly, even my OLED phone, because it's just so much bigger. Editing photo and video is also a major plus on this. I can finally see my content in true 4K on something that isn't a phone screen. And I can do it while I edit too, if I use this monitor as a playback monitor while I'm editing. Editing photos in Lightroom is also nice too, even if the UI is a little odd, but I get to see all the pixels of my cat's stupid weird face, which is... And the last bright side to getting one of these used 4K displays is, well, cheap brands like Scepter or Good Monitor for You or whatever the hell exists now will typically use reject panels from major brands like Samsung or, I don't know, LG. Does LG make good panels? To build their cheap monitors. Typically, smaller stuff people might not notice. Something maybe like dead pixels or backlight bleed. Unless you're like me, and you're cheap and picky. Then you might notice. If that's your case though, you don't have to worry as much about small defects like that. And if you do, you can always test the monitor before buying if it's in person, or if it's online, just return it, say it's defective. The build quality is way higher than those cheapo monitors, and frankly, I don't trust some cheap brand I've never heard of to build me a monitor that will last. But I sure as hell will trust Lenovo or BenQ or LG to build me something that will last at least a couple years, not Scepter or Z-Edge. Whatever that is, it's a real brand, Z-Edge. I wouldn't call this the most beautiful feature-packed monitor I've ever used, but honestly, a lot of this monitor is pretty average or above average. It just makes me want to get 3 of these and a used 4K TV for a whole new video editing setup I don't need. But if I do need it, let me know in the comments.